Today we are here with a gentleman from Ministry of Land, Housing and Urban Development. He's going to introduce himself in a while, but he's going to take us through the approval processes of the condominium developments that you see coming up in different areas of Kampala and Wakiso.
Thanks. My name is Dramani Santino. I'm from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, from the Directorate of Housing. The Directorate of Housing is responsible for housing policy implementation and is also responsible for implementation of the Condominium Property Act. I, as Dramani Santino, I take both official and personal responsibility for both the housing policy and implementation of the Condominium Property Act. Thank you.
This is a question that I also want to know the answer to, not just because the viewers are also inquisitive to know, but personally I also have interest in it. So what documentation is required for submission for the condominium developments to get approval?
The condominium approval process is simple, but to make it easy, the checklist has been established to make clear to the developers the various requirements that are needed for approval of the condominium plan. But in summary, the developers should have an interest to develop a condominium property right from the beginning. It should be condominium, and that should be expressed in the condominium plan which is developed, and it should be clearly labeled as condominium plan for development of condominium property. And another critical requirement is that the land must be surveyed and the land must be titled. So the presence of a title is very critical in showing the ownership of the land, and the condominium plan has to be developed professionally by the registered architect and endorsed by the architect, and it should be certified by the surveyor, and the owner has also to sign on the same plan that the contents, the plans are as per the desire of the owner, of the developer.
That is where desire goes back to that the developer has to have the desire to do it. Okay. You also mentioned that there is a list. Where can we find that list?
The list is available to all those interested developers. Prior to developing the condominium plan, the public is encouraged to come and seek for advice, for information on the basic requirements that I've talked about. And you come to the Ministry of Lands, and particularly the Housing Directorate, where I'm the Secretariat, or where there's a Secretariat, you'll be given the checklist so that you know all the requirements that are to do with preparation and submission of the condominium plan.
So what is also the typical timeline for these approvals? How long should one wait for the approval?
The timelines depend also on the preparation by the developer. If the plan is drawn, is developed in line with the requirements that I referred to in the checklist. The vetting committee, which is an administrative unit to authorize approval of the plan, will have no time to waste. Normally, every Thursday of the week, the committee sits to look at the plan, and if it's compliant on all the requirements, within a week, the plan should be vetted and forwarded to the local authority. In the case of Kampala City Authority, it is submitted to the executive director for the team in KCCA to look at the plan basing on other additional requirements. What are these additional requirements? The additional requirements will be to ensure that the plan follows the physical planning also aspects. And it should also be compliant on the environmental aspect. It should not be in a swamp. And these are some of the considerations which are made by the local authority. So the timeline will depend on the suitability of the plan submitted for vetting to the vetting committee of the ministry, and also the compliance of the plan in terms of development requirements to the local authority. So it is not cast in stone, but it depends on the compliance aspects, which a developer has also to be aware of. Otherwise, within a month, the plan should really be approved, depending on the workload in the local authority.
Like anything, there are always changes in daily life also. So, as Universal Multipurpose, we'd like to know, are there any new changes that we have to be aware of for the new upcoming developments?
For now, there are no new developments in the procedure of approvals. What is most important are the regulations. Regulations on development of the condominium plans 2002. These are the regulations. Condominium regulations 22. No, not 2022, 22.
Okay. 22.
Yes, 22, because the Condominium Property Act was developed in 2000, then ascended to by the President in 2001. Then it took a little while, and the regulations, which we are now implementing, were developed in 2002.
So this is taken note of that, people. It's not 2022, it's 2002.
2002.
So those are the regulations.
Those are the regulations we are following. Though there are some regulations, subsidiary regulations, which came in 2003. These subsidiary regulations include the one on management. Management of the condominiums is an important aspect of the condominium properties, and there is a body established through a board by the owners, and that regulation was developed in 2003. And another subsidiary regulation was also developed regarding the fines that have to be imposed on owners of condominiums who are offending the regulations, offending the rules of the corporation. So those are the subsidiary regulations to the main one, which was developed in 2002. Otherwise, there are no major changes in the regulations.
Thank you for that. So now we're going to some questions on compliancy and the regulatory standards of the Ministry of Lands and Housing for them to be able to approve the condominium plans that we submit. So what are some of the key regulatory standards that Universal must meet for its affordable housing projects? Bear in mind the keyword is affordable housing projects.
Yes. Affordable housing is a glossy term oftentimes. But the question is, affordable to who?
Okay.
Affordable to who? That question must be answered depending on the economic groups.
Affordable to the normal working class Uganda.
And that may be true, but still relative. Now, there are also many who are not working, who are in their own situations of housing. And under the affordable housing concept and practice, those you have not included under the working group, formal working group, also need to be considered under affordable. But relative as the term is, Universal Enterprises can also take on its level of the affordable group. Indeed, there are many layers of affordable groups, but the one we are looking at, I think, if I can read the minds of Universal, is the middle income. Now, our policy advice, because it is advisory, depending on the socioeconomic situation of the communities that need housing, is to design the house unit in a manner that can address the affordability issues for the low income, whichever category we are talking about. And that design of the house should, as generally adopted, should be 1 or 2 bedrooms in the design. Yes. 1 or 2 bedrooms. Of course, those 2 bedrooms, those rooms go with the services. The sitting room may be optional, but at least it will have the toilet, it will have the kitchen. And basically 1 or 2 bedrooms. But when it goes to 3, according to many standards, that goes to another level. And even if it is 1 or 2 bedrooms, the consideration is how many square meters floor area, built area are we talking about? Because a built area for each room may be so big, it may be 4 by 4, 4 by 5. This kind of bedroom may not easily, be affordable. So you should make it fairly affordable, but should not sacrifice the comfort. Yes, possibly 2 by 3, 3 by 3 is good enough as size of a bedroom. And therefore it could be 1 or 2 with the other service spaces. And also the materials that you use, without sacrificing the standards, should be locally available materials. And I'm happy to note most of the building materials that Universal uses are available, locally available building materials. Not so?
Yes.
And therefore, That is the policy principle on affordable housing, that the design should reflect affordability because it will reduce the cost, and two, the building materials, yes, should be locally available in making the cost, overall cost, lower and affordable for the particular target group we're looking at. These are other considerations, but they are not watertight. Yes. But making it affordable is largely based on innovativeness, being innovative in terms of the design, in terms of how you really use the building materials, yes, and how you also use the available land. And the condominium concept, which Universal Enterprise has adopted, is really the way to go, because the cost of a unit becomes more affordable if you go high rise instead of horizontal. And that is one of the practices we encourage developers to follow.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's interesting that you also spoke about the units in affordable housing. I was actually coming to that. Imagine one question led us to another, and we've actually covered compliance and regulatory standards.
Okay,
maybe that I would want to ask, are there some common compliance issues that usually developers face, and how can they be avoided?
Compliance issues are really the issues to do with environment. That really, as much as possible, we should respect the environment, because housing is built environment and it depends largely on the natural environment. And so the way you use the natural environment should actually be cognizant of the fact that you may be destroying the nature. And therefore, the materials that are used should not deplete the environment. That's an environmental aspect.
So the other topic where we usually get some questions is the land and zoning considerations that you take into place. And the first question I have, this one, I have it for myself. I have been thinking about it because we are in Chira as Universal Multipurpose. So the question really touches our hearts. How does the ministry view the development of affordable housing in emerging areas like Nigeria, and are there location-specific considerations for the approval of condominium development plans?
The ministry really wishes to see optimum utilization of land, and the zoning is an aspect that the ministry is concerned about. Concerned because a lot of development has overtaken the fiscal planning, and therefore this is a weakness on part of the general system, that while developments were taking place, fiscal planning and the zoning had not taken place. And this has made it very difficult for government to reverse that trend. And the implications are very catch up. And this is catch up or post-mortem kind of reaction. It is a post-mortem.
We're making you rush.
Yes. And it's really not easy for government, because the implications of restoring the zoning considerations are financially constraining to government. As much as possible, as government will wish to have a zoning which is based on integrated planning. And this integrated planning takes into account all the uses. uses one for housing, where universal enterprises is involved. And integrated should also take into account recreation areas. And integration should also take into account zones for industrial development where possible. At least employment opportunities should be provided within a locality. And employment is really the way is an aspect that a community needs.
I also believe as we develop, we also provide employment opportunities to the communities where we develop.
Indeed, those employment opportunities are welcome, but this could be based on the fact that development of estates, like a universal enterprise undertaking, by its very nature, provides the greatest employment for the workers, both skilled and unskilled. That is very commendable. But there are others in the community that also need employment of various types. And in any setting like Nigeria, consideration should be given for all these developments within a settlement area so that everybody is taken care of and unemployment issues are addressed accordingly. And therefore, that is the importance government attaches to integrated planning. However, a number of the developments really have not taken into account that. And the bigger problem, or the primary problem, has been the fact that development had already taken place haphazardly, and now we're trying to fight with the time, which is very expensive. And that is the problem we have with the zoning. But as much as possible, given the fact that Nigeria and other zones are within the city, and given that the city is fast urbanizing, the importance for development of residential housing as much as possible should be high-rise, taking the condominium approach. And government or local authorities are beginning to take interest in that, ensuring that to ensure optimum utilization of land and to provide adequate housing. The developments will not be horizontal, but vertical. Yeah. So that is how developments will take place in some of these areas, including Nigeria.
Okay. Another is this is just what we want to know more about this. What design features does the committee prioritize when evaluating affordable housing projects, and how can we continue to incorporate these into our plans?
Evaluating features are not really pegged onto the condominium and for observation by the vetting committee of condominiums. Actually, under the Building Control Act, under which the condominium development falls, all these regulations are there. So long as you are developing condominiums, you should, as much as possible, follow the regulations under the Building Control Act regulations, which are in place.
Control Act regulations.
Yes. And one or two that I can mention, that during the entire building process, starting from the foundation, all standards should be followed. When you are excavating, when you are setting the foundation, and when you are building, the standards should be followed up to even the end of the plumbing, the electrical safety regulations, and all those other regulations. Yes. And another important aspect is people with disabilities. Access for people with disabilities in any building should take into account the needs of the disabled.
I think that's why we have elevators.
Elevators, yes, if you have them, I think that is a way of addressing that. Even elevators now are elevating, but how does one access the elevator? Is there that access, access for the people with disabilities? That is often underlooked, and it is a cross-cutting consideration for all developments, including condominiums. Yes.
Mr. Dramani, does Universal's company affordable housing model align with the committee's goals?
I can say yes, but I want to base it first on the housing policy. The housing policy has a vision of adequate housing for all. The concept adequate housing is loaded, but it also covers the aspect of affordability. So when in its strategy, in the strategy of affordable housing under Universal, it really aligns very well because from its name, it seeks to provide affordable housing. And you can see in its designs, it has tried to move the talk of providing affordable housing, because over the years of implementation of these projects, the cost of housing units have come down, relatively more affordable. I look at the earlier projects under Universal. Universal implemented the Jupiter with the 80 units, Galaxy with the 40, Gemini in Nigeria also with the 40, Mercury Plaza with the 840 also, and so many others. And over a short time, over about 3-4 years, it had produced from this list 650 units, including the Taurus, the Leo Zodiac, Moonlight, Sunrise Avenues, Venus Villas. Venus Villas. So these are in hundreds already, and these were in the initial years. So in terms of affordable housing, the numbers also speak. The more the numbers, that means the greater the supply, the price tends to come down. And over the years, it has actually increased on the numbers. And therefore, you can see in the market, the prices for housing units has tended to come down. Therefore, in relative terms, it has become more affordable. That is in terms of the numbers. And also in terms of the designs, the 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms fit within the specification for low income and affordable housing. So to that extent, Universal has really fitted appropriately within the national objectives of making housing affordable. So I wish to commend Universal for that effort and partnership with the government in providing affordable housing. Though affordable is relative, but at least we are on that path. And I'm grateful as government for the efforts and the partnership on part of Universal Enterprises.
Thank you so much for that. And as we finish, how does the ministry envision the future of condominium development in Uganda in terms of accessibility, affordability, and social impact?
The vision we have on a condominium development is promising and is the way to go. And the considerations government had, which are the very objectives for the condominium property law and the implementation of the act, is that land is scarce. Land is scarce and the population is ever increasing. And more so with the urbanization and the natural growth, the population has gone very, very high and needs, among others, the services of housing, adequate housing at that. And therefore, we as government, our expectation from the private sector developers like Universal, that I must say has led that campaign, is to undertake development of condominiums, and that's the way to go. Not only is that the vision within the cities or municipalities, that is also the desire and vision for the rural areas. The other constraint used to be the lack of surveys, which is required in the development of condominiums. But now, within the rural areas, the land is being surveyed, and the program of government is to survey land. The point will be to also encourage people, the communities, households within the rural areas to also go high-rise and save the agricultural land for that purpose, instead of sparsing everywhere. Yes. So we need that kind of communal settlement as much as possible based on condominiums, high-rise, instead of spreading and invading useful agricultural land. Just like the challenge now we have in cities, the urban sprawl. You see how it is moving now. Kampala, where it is, will even be settled on about a quarter of the whole land, but now people are spreading everywhere. And that is a problem. You cannot see where we are going to end, and all previous agricultural land, which used to feed the cities, are now being invaded. That is a big problem in development. So as much as possible, our vision, the vision of government, is really to encourage condominiums. And already within the city, that is being advocated for, and in certain locations made compulsory. But a law should be good enough to enforce that, so that we use the land economically. So that is the vision. Condominium is the way to go.
We thank you, Mr. Dramani, for your time. Mr. Dramani is from the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I must say, as government, we thank Universal Enterprises for the efforts in developing affordable housing. And indeed, from our records, Universal Enterprises is the leading private sector developer in developing condominiums. And we encourage other developers to follow that example, and we should be able to make the government national objective of adequate and affordable housing for all a reality. On that note, I must thank also Universal Enterprises
Thank you
for
so
the
much.
efforts, national efforts. Thank you so much too.